everybody. Welcome back to BSing Sports. I'm Bill Brandt. That's Ryan Swift, BSing Sports. Thanks for joining us yet again. We are in week 19. We are almost at 20. Doing a great job keeping it going here.
Yeah, we didn't get a first round bye in this year's playoffs, so we got to keep going every week. We're playing the Thursday night game this time, though.
Yes, we are recording on Thursday night, and because my old man won't see this until after he's already seen me, it's because I'm surprising him for his 60th birthday in New Jersey. So, Dad, when you see this, you'll know that this had been planned for a little while. Attaboy. But moving on. So today we're going to talk about a little bit of NFL stuff, a little bit of MLB stuff, trade deadline and whatnot. We're going to touch on the Flyers a little bit in the NHL.
Wait, time out. You mean to tell me we're talking about just sports on this show? I'm out.
Yeah, I know. It's a little weird new concept for us, right? Just talking sports.
Name NFL, MLB, NHL, and
and then we'll do what we've been doing on our Hall of Fame fringe worthy players. We have two Philadelphia athletes this week that we're going to discuss, and I'm excited about both of those conversations. So having said that, let's move into our first topic. NFL news this week, I believe it came out on Monday afternoon. Cam Akers, running back for the Los Angeles Rams, ACL tear, Achilles tear. My apologies, Achilles tear. Ryan, why don't you go into that for a little bit, and then we'll talk about the impact.
Yeah, so Cam Akers tore his Achilles doing workouts, and I tore my heart out reading this because Cam Akers was my first running back I selected in Dynasty draft this year, so that hurt a little bit. However, there's not much precedent for this injury to bounce back from. We know Adrian Peterson had the same injury, and he bounced back just fine, went on to have a nice long career. But outside of that, this is one of those injuries where not only is this year out of question, but you kind of look at the rest of his career and it's like, how well is he going to bounce back from this? Cam Akers has such a skill set. You know, he was projected to be a 3-down back. He was going to catch passes. He was going to be the workhorse in that backfield for sure. Maybe a little bit of Darrell Henderson, but this is a big injury for the Rams. And this is big injury for Matthew Stafford too. In real life, this kind of brings his value down a little bit. You'll see a little bit less of a stacked box, and they'll expect to throw a little bit more. But in fantasy, that's good for Matthew Stafford. He'll probably put up, probably 50 more passes over the season than he normally would have had Cam Akers been in the backfield. So this is big, very, very big. And I wonder, Bill, do you think this changes the landscape of the NFC West a little bit? Because the Rams were some pretty heavy favorites.
I mean, I don't see how it doesn't. Cam Akers was a force to be reckoned with last year. Won the starting job halfway through the season, and never looked back. It was his the entire time from there on. So I don't see how it doesn't change the layout of the division at this point in time. I mean, based on what we saw last year, strictly on what we saw last year, the Cardinals are going to compete. The Seattle Seahawks are going to compete. The San Francisco 49ers are probably going to compete. I mean, even this year they got a backup plan if Garoppolo gets hurt, the Niners, that is. So the division's going to be tough. And even with that, when Cam Akers was healthy, the Rams weren't super favorites, but they were favorites in the division. And now with the Cam Akers injury, like you already said, the defenses aren't going to be stacking the box. They're not going to be looking Cam Akers shovel play or running up the middle every other down. And it puts a lot of pressure on an older Matthew Stafford at this point. I'm not saying he's super old, but he took a beating in Detroit. He's not as young as he once was. And now you put a lot of pressure on him.
At some point. No, he just turned 33.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, 33 isn't that old. Tom Brady's 41. But you go into now he's got not a similar situation in terms of offensive line, but he never really had a solid running back in Detroit. Now we're looking at the same situation here in LA. If I'm Matthew Stafford, I'm looking around like you better go find somebody, which leads me to my next thing. There are a pair of running backs on the market right now, one of which is Todd Gurley. The other one, I believe, is Mark Ingram. Is that accurate?
Le'Veon Bell's out there. Mark Ingram's still on Houston, but a lot of people are expecting him to get cut. That's a crowded backfield down there, so it's something to keep an eye on. But Le'Veon Bell and Todd Gurley were the first two names that kind of jumped off the paper at me.
And having said that, with those two guys jumping off the paper to you, which one do you think is more likely to end up in LA?
More likely to end up in LA, I'd say, because of his skill set, Le'Veon Bell, and injury history, Le'Veon Bell. Todd Gurley was obviously a prior Ram, and his arthritis in his knees, does not bode well for him. He's the oldest 28-year-old I've ever seen. But yeah, Le'Veon Bell's still on the correct side of 30. And this would be more of like a running back by committee thing. Nobody would expect Le'Veon Bell to take on the kind of workload that he had in Pittsburgh. This actually, you brought up a very interesting point in terms of Matthew Stafford kind of being here before, in terms of never having like a really elite running back with him. And this is true, especially for a guy who statistically loves throwing to his running backs. So they're gonna need to be very much sure that Darrell Henderson is a good pass catching back, because Matthew Stafford's going to dump the ball a lot. He loves his tight ends. He loves his running backs. Now, granted, he's got probably the best trio of receivers he's ever worked with in Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Van Jefferson, even Deshaun Jackson for the 3 games that he's going to play next year before he gets hurt. Philadelphia fans know that one too well. But this is a huge loss. And I think with my prediction in terms of how I lay out the NFC West now, as far as this goes, I pretty much penciled in the Rams at number 1, barring anything crazy. But now I think this is the type of injury you have where, depending on how early the 49ers go to Trey Lance and how well he performs with his skill set, you could see the 49ers place in that division pretty high. The 49ers only finished in last place last year because of injuries that, Nick Bosa was out the whole year with a torn ACL. Garoppolo missed a lot of time. And they just had various injuries all over the place. Raheem Mostert was hurt at some point. JaMychal Hasty, Jeff Wilson, those guys, the running backs just got depleted. So the 49ers got really plagued by the injury bug last year, and that's the only reason that they finished in last place, not because they lack any talent. So with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle's a force. They just drafted Trey Sermon, Trey Lance, with his skill set, whenever they decide to give him the reins, the 49ers can make some noise there. And I'm never going to discount the Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson's, been one of the most elite quarterbacks in the league for a long time. Chris Carson, and then you got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the outside. So that division is easily the hardest division in football. And this is the type of move where it's like, okay, we might give Darrell Henderson through the preseason in a couple weeks, but if he doesn't show us that he can do something, we're going to go get somebody.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. To your point on the Seahawks and the Niners, I would say, in my opinion, regardless of how early the Niners go to Trey Lance, because there's going to be a learning curve with the kid, I think with Cam Akers' injury, I would probably pencil in Seahawks, Rams 1A and 1A, even with the Cam Akers injury. But like you said, what Russell Wilson has done there for the last, what's it been, 10 years? Feels like 10 years.
My only issue with putting Seattle number 1, and they're always going to contend, but I think this is what keeps them from consistently being over the top, is one, that defense is not what it used to be in the early 2010s. It's not the Legion of Boom anymore.
That is true.
2, the Seahawks let Russ cook in the beginning of last year, like they promised. We heard all last offseason, Russell Wilson's going to throw the ball more. We're going to be more involved in the passing game. And it showed. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf exploded. Russell Wilson was, out of his mind. And the Seahawks were winning games. And then out of nowhere, they pulled the reins again and tried to hone in Russell Wilson. They started running the ball a little bit more, which isn't bad. Chris Carson's not a bad running back. But when you have a talent like Russell Wilson and guys on the outside like Metcalf and Lockett, I think they should have stuck with throwing the ball a little bit more, be a little bit more explosive on the offense. It's kind of the new age NFL. And I think them holding Russ back is going to be the reason that the team gets held back more so than, the defensive issues. But I just think if they can get past that coaching philosophy, we'll call it, then I believe they have more of a chance to be first in that division.
All right. Fair enough. Some other
quarterbacks.
There we go. Speaking of quarterbacks in the NFL, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. So Aaron Rodgers came out and tweeted our clan tag out here on Call of Duty. He said one more. And no, we're not talking about games of Warzone. Rodgers is reporting to training camp this year. He will play, or at least start the season, on the Green Bay Packers roster. I imagine he'll probably stay there. We can get into that a little bit later. However, news reported, I think the day after he said, I'm coming back, he said one more. I think the day after that, news leaked that he declined a 2-year extension that would have made him the highest paid player in football. So to me, this is not about the money. He does not want to be in Green Bay anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think he realizes he's won his only Super Bowl in Green Bay, and he wants a change of scenery on a contender that he can put over the top. when you decline a massive deal, it's clear it's not about the money. He made what, I hate to have to say it like this, he made a Tom Brady decision there in Green Bay, not care so much about the money. In addition to that, think about it. If let's say hypothetically he declines all that money, so Green Bay has the cap space for him now. Not only him, they have the cap space to go get him another weapon. So Devontae Adams isn't getting double teamed every game. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying maybe his thought process here was, okay, I'll do one more with Green Bay, give him an opportunity with the money to put weapons around me, and then maybe I'll sign an extension. Thoughts on that?
No, I
Yeah,
think
I
he's
think so.
done. I think after 10, what is it, 10 or 11 consecutive years of your first round pick being on the defensive side of the ball, you know, to me, I understand Aaron Rodgers' frustration. Like
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's wrong in this situation at all. I think there is a certain point where, like, okay, you view me as an organization as one of the best generational quarterbacks ever. You view me as a talent. Devontae Adams wasn't even a first round pick. All you've given me is Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, who's running back, so he's not catching passes for me a lot of the time, but it does help the offense. And the only reason Robert Tunyon's name even came up last year is because Aaron Rodgers was his quarterback. So they've given him nothing really. I mean, you look at a lot of Super Bowl winning teams or Super Bowl contending teams. What do they have? They have weapons on the outside, albeit not the Saints, but the Buccaneers. They have Chris Godwin, they have Mike Evans, and then they added Antonio Brown last year. Like they have weapons on the outside. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with just one stud receiver. It doesn't really happen like that anymore. You need at least, a complimentary tight end or somebody else in the picture to take the pressure off, and the Packers just have not done that for Aaron Rodgers. So I don't think that there's any way past his contract he stays here.
I agree with you. I was playing devil's advocate a little bit, trying to like give some other mentality for why he would sign a massive deal.
That.
But I agree with you. He's done in Green Bay.
Yeah, we've been wrong on this show before, so it could happen. That could be the reason. But however, one right doesn't make up for 11 years worth of wrongs.
Correct.
Moving on from the Aaron Rodgers thing, speaking of quarterbacks again, that seems to be a big topic on this show today. Howard Eskin, he's not much liked by the Philadelphia fan base. He's very brash, especially to people that call in on his shows. He reports, however, and various other outlets are also saying kind of similar things.
For what it's worth, Philadelphia may not like him, but he usually tells the truth.
Yeah. No, he's very truthful. He's very honest, and a lot of the times he's right. He's kind of like House. He's kind of like Dr. House. If you ever watch the show House, it's pretty much exactly how he is.
Yeah.
Howard Eskin reports that there's a 90% chance Deshaun Watson is traded to the Eagles this offseason. First things first, Bill, do you buy or sell that? Are you in on that, or you don't think that this is true?
I think that there's been a lot of information linking the Eagles to Watson since day one of him requesting a trade out of Houston, and then the realization that Carson Wentz was not going to be here. Since that point in time, it's been Watson to the Eagles more than any other team. I know people are saying the Broncos. I don't agree with that. It's got to be the Eagles, in my opinion. So I'm saying yes, this is real. In addition to that, I'm all for it. I know they're going to have to give up a huge package to get him. Probably our 2 first rounds and one of our 2 second rounds this year, and maybe another first later. Watson is absolutely 100%, without a doubt, a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts, Joe Flacco, and Nick Mullins. I would want Deshaun Watson on the roster. I would want Deshaun Watson starting. Yeah, he might get suspended for a few games with all these allegations out there. And on one of our first or second podcasts, we said we weren't going to touch it, but now it's 20 weeks later. And we are going to talk about it. So, yes, he has 22 allegations against him of sexual misconduct, but nothing has been confirmed. And it's looking more and more like as time goes on that maybe something won't be confirmed. That's all we'll say about it. And as such, regardless of that, even if the NFL suspends him for 4 games or 6 games or whatever it is, I want Deshaun Watson as the future franchise quarterback of my team.
Yeah, so those are that you led right into my second question, which was going to be, what do you think it would take to give up for Deshaun Watson? I could see 2 firsts this year and a first next year. And depending on what kind of suspension he seems to face, because the general consensus among reports and around the league is that he will face a suspension. We just don't know how long. Whether, it's 4 games, 8 games, or a year. If it's a year, it drives the price way down, which is good. It probably saves the Eagles a first round pick. In which case, I would give up 2 firsts this year and Jalen Hurts. I would easily give up Jalen Hurts for that. I know
I would play this
Texas
year with
probably
Joe Flacco.
they're probably going to want to draft their own quarterback, with Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell and Keaton Slovis coming out of the draft this year. But there, it's worth considering, especially because the Eagles could make some noise in a very, very, very bad division. So maybe that their first round pick is a playoff pick. Plus the Colts first round pick, it's a first round pick because the Colts will make the playoffs. So that's one of the conditions of the pick. And then Miami's always going to contend as well. So that there's there's a potential that these are going to be late first round picks. And if you're giving up a quarterback in the deal as well, it alleviates Houston's need to draft a quarterback. So I would absolutely, if it's 8 games, my ideal trade would be 2 firsts this year. I'd probably give up Miami. That's probably the one I'd keep. I'd probably keep the Miami one. I'd give up ours and the Colts one because realistically speaking, the Eagles is going to be the highest selection of the three. And the Colts will probably be the lowest selection of the three, but we'll get into that more when we break down how I view what's going to happen in the NFL. Um,
Which, by the way,
yeah,
we're doing in a couple of weeks live with Talking 215. We'll get into that later, though.
yeah. But yeah, I would absolutely give up 2 firsts this year and a first next year without a doubt. And this team doesn't have a lot of necessarily like holes that they would have to fill immediately. You have a young wide receiver core. You're supposed to let them grow. Maybe on the offensive line is probably where you could say, and the defensive line, they're a little bit old with Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, but you can get those outside the first round, no problem. Or you could trade back into the first round. So I would absolutely do that deal in a second if it landed me a franchise quarterback for hopefully double digit amount of years.
Yeah, it's worth noting Deshaun Watson's only 25 years old.
Yeah,
Like,
he'd play at a high level until his mid-30s for sure.
I would agree with that, yes. So we're going to move into the baseball a little bit, MLB. Trade deadline's coming up. We're not going to spend too much time on this. We've talked about it in previous weeks, but we're not saying Philadelphia specifically, even though we do have a couple of opinions on where people are going to go, and Philly is one of them because they're playing pretty well right now. I know they got swept by the Yankees, but they're playing pretty well. So trade deadline, who stays and who goes where? I'll let you fire away with 2 or 3 if you want, and then I'll fire away with 2 or 3.
Yeah, so I texted the group that we have with Talking 215 earlier in the week, and I said pen Chris Bryan into the Chicago White Sox. And I said this because Chris Bryant's a very versatile player, and he can cover outfield positions and third base. And with the injuries to Eloy Jimenez, who just started his rehab assignment, and Luis Robert, who's not too far behind him with his torn hip flexor, and you don't know how those guys are going to bounce back necessarily. You don't know if they're going to perform at the level they are. And Nick Madrigal tore his hamstring, so he's also out for the season. They could use the infield and outfield depth, somebody to provide them a big bat who can play multiple positions in the lineup. So that way, if Eloy and Luis Robert turn out to be good, you can put him back at third base and, you can fill a hole there, or you can have him DH or something. There's versatility there with Chris Bryant, and he fills an absolute need for the Chicago White Sox right now. If they're going to contend for a World Series, they pretty much have the division on lock. They got to play pretty much like 500 ball from here on out, I think, and they'll be just fine. So pen to me, pen Chris Bryant, not pencil, pen Chris Bryant into the Chicago White Sox, and they have the ammo to give up to the Cubs for him too.
Okay.
I think.
Well, before you move on, talking strictly about the Cubs, I won't even go into the closer because that's one of mine.
Yeah.
Javier Baez, you really think the Cubs move off of Javi?
Absolutely. It's funny you asked that question. So Javier Baez reportedly wants a $200 million deal from the Chicago Cubs, which I think it's outrageous to ask for $1 for every strikeout you're going to have during the season. So 200 million strikeouts is probably what he's about on pace for. Javier Baez is like, I compare him to a less talented hitting wise Omar Vizquel. Like, the dude in the field is unreal. He has the best set of hands you've ever seen from a middle infielder. The no look tag plays on the throw downs to second, every diving stop. This guy's a perennial Gold Glove winner forever. But He just strikeouts too much. He's very boom or bust at the plate, and it's more bust than boom, especially the last couple of years. So I would not be shocked at all because they could get a decent return off of him. Maybe a change of scenery changes his bat a little bit. And like I said, the glove value is always going to be there, and he's a young player, so they could definitely deal him and get some prospects for him, something decent in return to a team that's hurt him for middle infielders.
All right.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way that they pay him over $200 million. I think with them moving off of Chris Bryant and the guy you're going to talk about in a couple minutes, plus the Anthony Rizzo's been thrown out there a little bit too. Wilson Contreras, his name has been tossed around. So they're not in any shape to retain guys. They need to sell off this core and move on.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So the guy I'm talking about, what Brian was referring to really quick, Craig Kimbrell, closer for the Chicago Cubs. There's obviously a need in Philadelphia for a competent closer.
Somebody the whole time you talk about him.
So anyway, yeah. So Phillies are in need of a competent closer. They've blown more late inning games in the last 2 seasons than at this point years I've been alive times 2. It's just a ridiculous number. So we need somebody who can come in and shut the door late innings, and Craig Kimbrell can give that to you. He's got a .73 ERA right now. He's what is he? 21 for 22 on save opportunities.
Yeah, he's something like that.
Yeah, he's having a phenomenal season. I know he was a little bit off the last 2 years, but right now he's pitching out of his mind, and there's a need in Philly for a closer. So I think Craig Kimbrell could be moved, and I think one of the likely locations is Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's a high priority, and it's a guy that the Phillies are very familiar with. You know, Craig Kimbrell started his career pitched quite a few years in Atlanta, so it's even when he was young, he still has the same kind of stuff too. You know, he's adopted more of like a knuckle curve rather than the slider he used to have, but he's still got the nasty stuff. It's still there. The guy still competes. He's still, he's out here, fiery attitude. He is a closer. He is a closer that would do very well in Philadelphia too, and people would be elated to hear this news.
Yeah. Who else you got?
I think another big name for me is Kyle Gibson from the Rangers, which is not the biggest name on the Rangers. It's probably being talked about for the trade deadline. However, I believe it's the most realistic. He could go anywhere. There's always a need for starting pitching. And I believe, and this kind of hurts me to say, the Mets are in the running for Kyle Gibson. He's a little older. He's 33 years old. So it's not like this is some young pitcher you're going to retain for 10 years. And this is by far an outlier season for him. This is kind of, even a little bit above where he was projected when he was a prospect with the Braves many years ago. He was projected to be like a mid-range starter, and this is finally his breakout year. Maybe it's the start of like a good 2 or 3 year run or something. But there's Kyle Gibson's probably going to be on the move, and it could be anywhere. It's so hard to predict where starting pitching can go because there's always a need for it amongst contenders.
All right. Trevor Story.
Yep.
So it's been rumored that he's getting out of Colorado, but not by anybody in Colorado, which I think is interesting. It's like every other MLB analyst on ESPN and MLB.com are saying that Trevor Story has asked for a trade, and the Rockies have said nothing in return to him, which is interesting to me. They could get stuff for him. They could get some prospects for him.
Yeah, I hadn't heard all that. That's kind of weird that they would say that. This dude's in a contract year, so I don't think pissing him off is exactly the right way to go about this, because either on one hand you lose him and get something in return, or the other hand you lose him and get a compensation pick in return, which is a guy that like 50% likely won't even reach AAA. So
from what I understand, he requested and they just didn't give him an answer.
I heard he requested. I hadn't heard a response back, but I hadn't really looked too hard either. But that would make a lot of sense. I could probably Google search it and not find one. So
having said that, and I'm going to do it again, one of the teams that have been linked to Trevor Story, Philadelphia Phillies, they have a serious need in center field.
And Trevor Story playing. Talking about putting Story in center.
The article I read like 2 hours ago said Story in center field.
All right. Well, I think that's a hot take more than an actual report for sure.
Because I think the most likely landing spot for Trevor Story is probably going to be the Padres.
Where would he play?
Don't know. but they seem like they're trying to build.
They probably have the best infield in baseball. There's no way. I can't see them going to the Padres. I think they'd go. I think they're a contender for a Max Scherzer or Kyle Gibson.
I was going to say Scherzer to the Padres, actually.
Actually, since we're talking about people to the Padres, this was rumored years ago when the Phillies were selling them off, but Cole Hamels, he's from San Diego.
That would make sense for Cole Hamels. That would make sense.
It makes sense for the Padres too. They're a young team. They could use the veteran experience guy with, a lot of postseason innings.
Yeah, no, you're right. We could touch on the Cole Hamels thing real quick. There's not much to talk about. He apparently looked pretty good in his showcase when we recorded last week.
88 to 92 from what we were saying, which, I mean, if he's topping out at 92, that's just, whipped cream on top. I was expecting high 80s and maybe him to touch 90, but if he can get back and get 92 and his changeup's always been, filthy, then
yeah, I mean,
that's a good sign.
From what we read, I think we read the same article. His changeup looked good. His curveball, he was having trouble placing it, but as you pointed out in the text conversation, he's got to loosen up.
Yeah, well, his curveball's always been average at best anyway. He's never had a good curveball. I mean, that's kind of what separated him from being one of the elite starters ever. But I think.
You have any more trade deadline candidates?
No, I mean, we've kind of touched on people here and there throughout the last couple of weeks. So, and I'm sure we'll touch on it probably a little bit more next week, even though the trade deadline will probably already have been passed by the time we film. So we'll probably just be touching on all the moves that happen. But yeah, no, I got nothing. Actually, on MLB news, I sent this text to my buddy last night. Yermin Mercedes, who started his career off on fire with the Chicago White Sox, 8 for 8 to start the season and was just absolutely hitting bombs. And then he had that very infamous, call out from his manager, Tony La Russa, that we addressed on this show many weeks ago about swinging at that 3-0 pitch went up huge. And then he was sent down to AAA a couple weeks ago where that because he was struggling so bad after that call out. And then he started hitting the ball again. I think he was hitting 304 in AAA. He just up and retired last night. Said he's done playing baseball.
I missed that.
Yeah, he said he's done. My speculation initially, based off what I read, is that he was playing well enough to come back to the majors, but didn't want to play for Tony La Russa anymore. So instead of causing a drama by saying that, he just stepped away from baseball.
Do we have any contract details on him? Because I'm wondering if in a couple of years when his contract folds over, if he's right back in the league.
Well, it's funny you say that because my buddy Smitty texted me in response. He was like, I wonder if he hits the free agent market in the offseason and comes back. Because he didn't say he was like gone forever. He just said, I'm done indefinitely. So
it sounds like he doesn't want to play for La Russa.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. I don't know if I'd want to play for a quirky manager like La Russa. They're pretty old school minded and a new school age. I mean, obviously I'd love to play baseball, and quite frankly, I personally would deal with it. But a guy in his situation, getting called out the way that he did, I could understand his want to not play for La Russa anymore. So it's that's an interesting story to follow. I'm curious as to what the locker room really is like there. The saying winning cures all, but I mean, I wonder if the White Sox, happen to slip up, what'll be said about Tony La Russa.
Yeah, that's something we're gonna have to keep our eye on.
Yeah, for sure. But leading into the NHL, we talked about it before. We did a very sporadic live segment on it about the Ryan Ellis trade. We all agree that was a very good trade. The Flyers made another move earlier today, early on this Thursday morning. They traded Shane Gostisbehere, also known as Ghost, to the Arizona Coyotes. And they also sent a 7th and a 2nd rounder from 2022. In exchange, they got nothing in return except the free $4.5 million of cap space. What were your initial thoughts on this trade, and what do you think now that it's settled in a few hours?
Well, for starters, the first initial report that came out was that the Flyers received a 2nd and a 7th, and I said, wow, we really got over on Arizona.
yeah, it did report like that too, and I was like, geez, I mean, this is a dude that passed at the waiver wire for nothing, and then we got a 2nd round pick for him. And
yeah, but then when the actual report came out, we had our buddy over at Talking 215, Frankie, confirm it for us. It's that we did send a 2nd and 7th with us. The Flyers were desperate to be out of Ghost. desperate. They wanted out of his contract. They realized that they had made a mistake. He wasn't what he had shown in his first 40 or so games. And he was a liability on the ice. We talked about this with Frankie last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. He was a liability on the ice, and the Flyers realized it, and they were basically begging somebody to take him off their hands, and the Coyotes said, sure. Not to mention the Coyotes have a ton of draft picks now.
Yeah, I mean that Andrew Ladd deal. I mean, this is going to be the not the NHL draft. It'll be the Arizona Coyotes draft and others. That's what we'll call it, because they have like 80 picks. It's nuts. I think they finessed New York for like 2 first rounders. They got like a second rounder and like 2 third rounders. It was nuts. They got like 5 picks, but granted, Andrew Ladd is getting paid like $7 million a year. So yeah, this is a good trade. I know a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, we got nothing in return." Well, now the Flyers are more than $13 million, within cap space. They still have Carter Hart and Travis Sanheim to give contracts to. If Morgan Frost comes off IR and Wade Allison, they still have to pay. Those little contracts add up. They could potentially give Hart, like a 3-year, $4.5 million deal. So that would kind of replace Ghost's salary right there. But it'd be well more worth it to give it to Hart, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah, Ghost never really fit in though. He just didn't fit Alain Vigneault's scheme. Like at worst, in Alain Vigneault's scheme, your defenseman should be able to play defense. You can't imagine too many true offensive defensemen would thrive in this system, and that's what Ghost is. And he just didn't look right. Even his last few years as a Flyer under Hackstall too. He just, he had his best year 2017, 2018 under Hackstall, but after that it was nothing from him. So I'm glad to be rid of him, and we still get to keep our first round pick. So, but the swirling rumors are that this frees up cap space for a couple players that are disgruntled with their current teams.
Yes. So the rumor here is, I can't think of his first name. What's Eichel's first name?
Jack.
Jack. So the rumor. So if I'm not mistaken, the Seattle Kraken had their expansion draft this week. They took Jack Eichel.
They took absolutely nobody. The Seattle. Let me touch on that real quick. The Seattle Crackheads expansion draft was awful. Like, I think Jordan Eberle and Chris Driedger were probably the only 2 people that I actually liked. I don't know why Driedger's getting ragged on so much. I think it's because they passed up Carey Price to take him. But Carey Price is a legend. But for a franchise who's just starting, he's old. He's very old. Carey Price is, well past his prime, albeit still a good goaltender. But Chris Driedger is 25 years old, and he's coming off 2 very good seasons where his goals against average were 205 and 207. Like, this guy he was taking starts away from 2-time Vezina Trophy winner Sergei Bobrovsky. Not Bobrovsky was losing them because he had good seasons too. So this dude he's a good goaltender, and this is the opportunity that maybe he needs. And if it doesn't work out, they took Vitek Vanacek, which, I mean, not bad. I don't love it, but again, not bad. So the Seattle Kraken are off to a very questioning start under Ron Francis and Dave Haxtell. I'm curious as to how that team performs on the ice.
I gotta imagine we can take a wild guess and say it won't be as good as the Knights.
Yeah, I think the Knights set a really unorthodox precedent for expansion teams in any sport. But
I mean, I get that, but like the layout was right there for the Kraken. Like they had it. They passed on a ton of good people.
I'm surprised they didn't do something along the lines of, maybe Carey Price and then have Driedger back him up for a year. Or I know it's tough to tell Carey Price, hey, you're only getting 70% of the starts when you're paying him $11 billion. But that Carey Price is a legend. Anybody could learn under him. So, and I thought it was, it was a gamble that paid off for the Montreal Canadiens to leave him unprotected. They said, hey, maybe Seattle will be scared of his salary. And that's exactly what happened, because Seattle took no big contracts from anybody.
Yeah. Don't they have to meet a minimum? Did they meet the minimum?
That was the curious thing. They have to meet a minimum by the start of the season. Through the preseason, they have to meet a minimum, I think, 2 days prior to the start of the regular season. So there are going to be some side deals made, and they'll sign people to, maybe some inflated contracts. They just signed 4 years, $16 million to somebody that they traded for the rights to. I can't remember his name at the time, but they also got Jordan Eberle. Jordan Eberle came with a bit of a price tag. I think he's like in the $6.5 million range, somewhere in there. So that was an interesting draft to say the least. Although they're young and big on defense, quite literally, I think their smallest defenseman's like 6'1" and 200 pounds. So their average age on the blue line is like 24 or 25. So they might have done okay there, but their forwards are definitely suspect.
Okay. I don't really have a lot of information on Jack Eichel. Ryan is way more versed in hockey than I am. I'm not going to lie to anybody. Nobody's going to get here and upset me by telling me I don't know anything about hockey. That's perfectly fine.
Ooh, you suck.
For a while there, Eichel to the Flyers rumors were really swirling. Then after the Flyers went and got Ellis the other day, it looks like that conversation has cooled down. Now, having said that, if we were going to add more firepower with the new cap space, who's a player that you would want the Flyers to target outside of Eichel?
So the two big names that have been tossed around, Jack Eichel and Vladimir Tarasenko. If I had my choice between the two, I'd go Eichel, but I'll get in that in a second. However, as I've said to you, Bill, on the side, there is an ideal player out there where apparently it looks like Nashville's selling off some assets. So let's go ahead and get this guy. And that's Philippe Forsberg. And I think this is the perfect scenario if Nashville decides that they are sellers. And that is because Philippe Forsberg is coming into a contract year. So he may not return to Nashville anyway if they're telling him, hey, we're going to start a rebuild. I don't think a sniper in his prime wants to be in the middle of a rebuild.
No.
So this dude is an elite goal scorer. He's on a 6-year, $36 million deal. So he comes with a $6 million cap hit, which is reasonable, very reasonable for a guy who in a full 82 game season would average 30 goals a year. I think he's 0.36 goals per game. So that's about 30 goals per season. And his only issue is he misses a game here or there. He's had some nagging injuries over the last couple of years. He's played 82 games, I think, in 3 or 4 seasons. However, he's played enough games where he's scored like 26, 28, 26 goals again. And he was hurt a little bit more last year. So maybe that drives his price tag down even more. But this guy is an elite top line goal scorer. And if you put him with on the right wing, which is his natural position, with Sean Couturier and Claude Giroux, that's a very lethal top line, not just offensively, but defensively, because Forsberg has a problem skating, but he's got good size. He plays a physical game for a sniping winger.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And in this fantasy world, I would give up Travis Konechny and a second round pick. I don't think I would go first round pick unless Forsberg came out and said, yeah, I'll sign an extension with the Flyers. If that were the case, I would make it a second round pick conditional to a first that the Flyers make the Eastern Conference final. To me, that would be a very fair deal. And they're getting a young winger who's locked into basically the same kind of deal in Travis Konechny. He's a couple years younger, so it helps them with their rebuild. It manages their cap. It gives them a young winger to build around. And Konechny's a good skater in himself. He has skill sets that he could deliver to the team. And in an 82 game season, he averages 22 goals a year. So it's not like they're losing much, but I think Philippe Forsberg fits the Flyers way more than Travis Konechny does.
All right. Sounds good. You want to go into our final little category here?
Yeah. So week 2 of Hall of Fame debate. And if you guys missed last week's show, basically this is a show where last week we said that it was going to be players still playing currently on projection to barely make or barely miss the Hall of Fame. That's why it's called Hall of Fame debate. However, I broke our own rules, and I can do that because I'm a co-host on this show. I picked a player who is retired and had a fringe career. He has not been on the Hall of Fame ballot yet, so it'll still be, kind of fresh, kind of new. But first, let's go ahead and discuss your player because he is still playing, and this one's going to get me hot. I'm about to start yelling into the mic.
The player I chose is none other than the, for some reason, disliked in Philadelphia, Claude Giroux. So we know his jersey's gonna hang in the rafters in Wells Fargo Center. We know he's gonna make the Flyers Hall of Fame. We know that. I don't think there's any question about that. Hall of Fame career. He's got 943 games played, 273 goals, 585 assists, 858 points. He's got a plus minus of 39 over his career as a forward. Let's see. He's got
74 points in 84 playoff games, I believe is the number.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you. 74 points in 80 playoff games. He has scored more than 20 goals in all but 3 of his seasons, and one of them was a shortened season.
Yeah.
And
What about in the lockout year 2012? How many goals did he have?
28.
In 2012?
2012, 28. 20 is it 2011, 2012 or 2012, 2013?
2011, 2012.
No, it's 2012, 2013. He played 48 games, 13
Yeah.
goals.
Yeah, that was the other shortened season.
Correct. Yeah. So again, 4 times in his career he hasn't scored 20 goals in a season, and 2 of them were shortened seasons via lockout. He's been you know what stands out most to me about Claude Giroux? I should have looked at the stats before, so I wasn't like sitting here scrambling on the website trying to find them, but that doesn't matter to me. The thing that stands out, and I know it's in the world we live in, it's a what have you done for me lately world. What was it, 2014, 2013 playoffs against the Pittsburgh Penguins?
Crosby,
Game 7.
I knew you were going there.
Check on Sidney Crosby. And forever since that moment, he will be in my heart as a Flyers great. Now, do I believe he is Hockey Hall of Fame worthy? If he continues on the same trajectory he's got for another 5 years, I think he does make the Hall of Fame.
So this is an interesting topic around Philadelphia. I think it's a little less interesting nationally because Philadelphia tends to be harder on their good athletes than most other fan bases do. To me, this is almost not a fringe, but in the Hall of Fame. Claude Giroux, yeah, you're talking about the shift. It's identified as the shift. If you ever mention anybody in Philadelphia, the shift, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. Claude Giroux on the opening faceoff went over and laid out Sidney Crosby, which got the fans going. And then I think 30 seconds later scored the opening goal, beat Marc-Andre Fleury short side. I can picture the goal in my head. It was a one-man show out there for like 30 seconds. It was awesome. But Claude Giroux is extremely durable. I think he's missed like 5 games in the last 6 years or something like that, not including that COVID stretch. Can't really do much about that. But he's very durable. He's never been a goal scorer. So the fact that you bring up 2 full seasons where he didn't score 20 goals is, 20 goals is kind of like the bottom plateau for guys who are considered, decent goal scorers. So the fact that he's never been a primary goal scorer and he's done that is mind blowing in itself. This is a guy over the span of 10 years, that is a decade, has finished 4th in overall points. And out of the entire top 10 list is the only guy on that list to average over a minute of penalty kill time every game. So that means that he is more than just a passing guy. He's more than just a goal scorer. This guy is out on the ice 18, 19 minutes a game playing shorthanded on the power play, which over that same span of 10 years, he led the league in power play points because he led the league in power play assists. This guy is unreal. And had we not gotten screwed in the draft where we had JVR and we had the first overall pick and gotten Patrick Kane, that would have been a lethal duo. However, that's beside the point. Claude Giroux is absolutely a Hall of Famer, and Claude Giroux is going to continue on a 60 point per full season for like the next at least 3 years, probably 4 to 5. 38's really not that old in hockey anymore. You see a lot of guys. Patrick Marleau's still producing. Ovechkin, who's more of a pure sniper, he's still out there producing. It's not uncommon for durable guys to be out there for so long. And I could see Claude Giroux playing another 5 years. And I hope all 5 of them are in Philadelphia and he gets a chance to hoist the cup. This is a dude who gets shamed for his bad leadership by guys who have never stepped foot in an AHL locker room, let alone an NHL locker room. So they have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. All the other players he plays with comes out and support him. As I've said before on this show, he's never played with an elite goal scorer. So the fact that he has all these assists over these years means he's making his teammates better, but his teammates aren't helping him out a whole lot. This guy is a Hall of Famer. And if the Hall of Fame voters recognize that he has had no help in this organization that's run by a damn TV company, this guy's going to finish his career with over 1,000 points. He's almost at a point per game basis in the playoffs. So I think he's 89th all time, which hockey's been around for almost 100 years. So the 89th all time is pretty good. This is
Mic
nuts.
drop.
I think it's kind of sad that this is, you know, a debate, and I'm glad that you brought the name up there, because a lot of people in Philadelphia will tell you, even the level-headed ones, he is a fringe Hall of Famer. But if you see this with a clear eye, and if he did this anywhere else outside of Philadelphia, it'd be no debate. And the rest of the
Yes.
league, actually, it's
Yes.
funny that we're sitting here talking about this, because I saw on a neutral Facebook page run by a Bruins fan. It's called Complete Hockey News. I followed them in the offseason last year. They were doing a vote on which player deserves a Stanley Cup that hadn't had one. And in the finals was Nathan MacKinnon and Claude Giroux, and Claude Giroux blew him out. And this is a page based out of Boston. I think he's a Boston fan. So the fact that, you know, a page run by a rival of the Flyers is garnering enough support for the Flyers captain is, you know, he is the Flyers captain. He's played the most games as the Flyers captain. He just passed Bobby Clark earlier this year. So to me, this is not much of a debate, but people are making it more of a debate than it needs to be.
People in Philadelphia are making it more of a
Yeah,
debate.
absolutely.
Yes.
And people in
I
Philadelphia are idiots.
I wanted to bring up the Claude Giroux thing because I knew how passionate you were about it, and I wanted to say it. Makes for good podcasting.
Yeah, no kidding. So I'll let you go on a rant about this one. This is another guy who took Philadelphia's heart and soul and ran with it. And this is the retired player I was talking about. Hasn't been on the Hall of Fame ballot yet, but it is the one, the only Chase Utley. Bill, MLB Hall of Famer or not?
So Chase Utley, MLB Hall of Famer. If we're basing what you said last week, what a Hall of Famer should be, it's that he's the best person at his position for X amount of time. Yeah. That's one of the criterias, in your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I stated. You know, Roy Halladay was the best pitcher in baseball for a double-digit amount of years, so that's what got him as a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Now, it's a little bit different for infielders, middle infielders specifically. They usually wear out faster, so you're not talking a decade of being the best second baseman in baseball. However, from 2006 to 2000 and probably 11, Chase Utley was, if not one of the best second basemen in baseball. And it was never even a competition. In that span, anywhere you looked, anytime anybody was talking about second baseman or middle infielders in general, including the shortstop position, Utley's name was always at the top of the list. Again, either one or two for a solid 5 to 7 years. Hands down, Chase Utley, in my opinion, underappreciated outside of Philadelphia, which is the opposite of what Claude Giroux is. Chase Utley outside of Philadelphia was completely underappreciated. When he went to the Dodgers, he unfortunately, was older in his career. He didn't perform as well. It brought his batting average down to 275 for his career, which is unfortunate again. But he's a 6-time All-Star. He won the World Series in 2008. Very easily could have won the MVP if Cole Hamels hadn't put on a clinic at the pitching position. He got a 4-time Silver Slugger. Again, I'm hands down, my opinion, hasn't even made the ballot yet. He should be in the Hall of Fame.
How many home runs does he have?
Career?
Yeah.
259 home runs, 1,885 hits. Again, 275 batting average. His OBP, 358 because he was taking walks. OPS of 823, 465 slugging. He stole, so keep in mind, he wasn't necessarily the typical power hitting second baseman. However, he did have power, and he was also quick early in his career. He stole 154 bags, and he had over 1,000 RBIs. To me, in my opinion, based on, like I said before, the guy was the best second baseman, if not the best second baseman in baseball for a long period of time. And while his batting average doesn't show elite status, if you remember those years, he was elite. And because of that, I believe he belongs in the Hall of Fame.
So I am glad that you touched on the fact that middle infielders have a different precedent for being in the Hall of Fame than most, especially second baseman, because when you think of shortstops, you think of at minimum flashy defense. They're always going to play good glove, and they always got speed. So they always have 3 to 5 tools on lockdown, being arm strength, glove, and speed. And that's what you think of when you think of second baseman. You think kind of like utility players. You think of like plug and play guys. You think of guys like Kike Hernandez. There are very few comparatively to other positions, second baseman over the course of baseball that have impacted the game, the way other positions would. And that being said, my precedent for second baseman Hall of Famers is Jeff Kent. And Jeff Kent played many, many a years. I think it was 16 or 17 years. Played for the Giants, the Dodgers, the Mets, and I think he started. I think he played like half a season in Cleveland. Yeah, I'm looking at his stats right now. Half a season in Cleveland. So Jeff Kent is a guy who was known as like he just flipped the second base position on its head. He is a guy that hit almost 400 home runs in his career, which is unheard of for second baseman. It doesn't happen. Not known much for his speed like Utley was. Utley was also a very smart base runner. That generally doesn't get considered when talking about Hall of Fame. That's more of like a day-to-day thing. But Utley was a very smart base runner as well. Jeff Kent, though, for between 1997 and I will read out through 2005. So his stats go his home runs go 29, 31, 23, 33, 22, 37, 22, 27, 29. His RBIs, he had over 100 in all of those seasons but one. So this guy really put a light on the second base position, and he was like, yeah, I'm the best second baseman around. And in those 7 seasons that I mentioned, he was an all-star in 5 of them. He also won an MVP, and he's a 4-time Silver Slugger. A lot of good stats there, a lot of good numbers, very impactful player, especially for his position, is not in the Hall of Fame. He has been on the ballot for some time now because he retired in 2008 and is not in the Hall of Fame. This is troubling for Chase Utley's outlook because Chase Utley doesn't have near the power numbers or as long of a peak, not necessarily as high, but as long. Jeff Kent was better for longer.
That is a fair argument. That is a fair argument. And as you've already pointed out, the precedence for second basemen or middle infielders in general to get in the Hall of Fame is more strict. Now,
it's for sure skewed. And so, in my opinion, should Chase Utley be a Hall of Famer? I think he should be a closer miss than he's going to be. I don't think Chase Utley gets in the Hall of Fame. On the right day, if I'm in the right mood, you may convince me that Chase Utley should be a Hall of Famer. However, for 5 years, yes, he was the best second baseman in baseball, but to me, he's still, if he was the best second baseman for 7 or 8 years, like Jeff Kent was, Jeff Kent to me absolutely should be a Hall of Famer. I think it's atrocious he's not. Batting 290, 377 home runs for his career, almost 2,500 hits. The fact that he's not is a disgrace, quite frankly. But to me, it's a fringe miss. But if he got in one day, then I would be like, you know what, I'm not entirely surprised. Based on the fact, not just so much his play on the field, but the way that he captured probably the hardest sports city to play in. It's hard to play in Philadelphia, and he really had this city's heart and soul. Him, Rollins, and Howard.
But I mean, when your first hit is announced by Harry Kalas and it's a grand slam at the Vet, I mean,
that's a little bit more of like a Philadelphia fans only memory, but it's still iconic. So to me, he's a fringe miss.
All right.
But I think he's going to miss by a little bit more than that, just because of the quite unfair precedent that seems to be set for middle infielders. I mean, Omar Vizquel is probably the best fielding shortstop ever, and it took him like 10 years to get in.
All right. Again, I respect your opinion on that, and that's why we have these debates, is we get to talk about it.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm getting a FaceTime call from Frankie right now.
Well, we're about to get off, so you can answer him back in just a few minutes.
Actually, let me go ahead and cite this news real fast. So this dropped today with the rumor that the NFL is going to be having teams forfeit games because if they start COVID outbreaks or whatever, if DeAndre Hopkins came out and tweeted that he's questioning his future in the NFL because he doesn't want to cost his team because of his decision to get non-vaccinated. What are your quick thoughts on that?
I think the NFL should stay the F out of politics. It should not come to whether or not, because the world is divided on the vaccine. There's no question that the world is divided on the vaccine. If the guys want to get it, let them get it. If the guys don't want to get it, they don't have to get it. Now, you're talking about suspending teams, forfeiting games because certain players in the team didn't want to get vaccinated and an outbreak happens. How can you specifically pinpoint that against the people who didn't get vaccinated?
Yeah, it's a tough situation, and I think this sets a really bad precedent for the NFL. And this is going.
It's a huge mistake.
This is going to get enough pushback where it doesn't go through. There's no way it won't. But because other stars like DeAndre Hopkins type level will come out and say things like this, and then the pushback from the fan base that you get, this won't go through. There's no way. But
good.
Yeah, it's interesting that like if the NFL decided to go through with this, how many people like DeAndre Hopkins would actually step away from football? Like
you could
imagine
based on the way it's divisive everywhere else, you'd have to assume somewhere between 45 and 55% of players would walk away. You have to assume that. I'm not saying that's what would happen.
Yeah.
But the way it's divisive, the word is difficult for me to say.
Yeah, divisive. Like the way vaccine opinions are divided.
Correct. It's about 45 to 55% one way or the other. You have to assume that as the NFL, that when you make this kind of decision, that's the result you're going to get. Yeah.
So more to come on that as the NFL makes a decision. But I just wanted to throw that in there before we exited this week's show. Subscribe, watch on YouTube. We're on Spotify. And as Bill already prefaced a little bit, in a couple weeks, we will be on Facebook Live with the Talkin' 215 crew, Jake Biasato and Frankie. Of course, we've had Frankie on our show a couple times. And we will be talking Eagles football. We will be doing kind of a preseason, preface to what we expect from the team and just some general NFL things. So make sure you guys check that out as well. Share with your friends, tell everybody about us. Just throw it in random conversations so that way people get uber confused as to what you're talking about. But it'll draw some more attention. So, Bill, you got anything to add?
No, like Ryan said, we're on almost every platform. Please follow and subscribe and give us some comments, like we said before. As always, thanks.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Another